First Minister, thank you for talking to LBC. You've been First Minister now for 8 years. Given there's going to be no movement on a second independence referendum until after the Supreme Court hearing makes its decision, what are you going to be telling your members this weekend? I mean, what new things do you have to say? And will there be a message beyond the hall to Scots who maybe don't vote SNP, or that 53% who say, you know, we're quite keen on independence, but we don't want a referendum next year?
Well, the entirety of what I say will be intended to go beyond the hall. I mean, my party members are really important. They, fuel the success of the SNP. But for any party in government in particular, it's important that you speak to the broader population. What will I be saying to my party? We live in really difficult times. That often sounds like a political cliche, but it is truer now than it has ever been. So I'll have a focus on the actions the Scottish Government is taking and needs to continue to take to support people and public services through a really, really difficult time. But I'll also be saying that, yes, the process issues around a referendum will be heard in the Supreme Court next week. There's little point in any of us speculating about the outcome of that. But the substantive case for independence is the one we need to continue to make and to build. And, frankly, there couldn't be a better time to do that given the chaos and the instability and the uncertainty that is coming from the alternative. So these messages will be, I think, grounded in realism given the difficulty, but also, and I think this is important in tough times, is to give people hope and optimism. It doesn't have to be like this. There is a better future out there. We need to grasp it.
So do you think Liz Truss then, as the new Prime Minister, has made independence more or less likely?
Look, I think Scotland is going to become independent. It's not really about Liz Truss as a person. I'm not going to personalise it to that extent. What she does, though, is further illustrate the underlying democratic deficit. Scotland didn't vote for Liz Truss. Now, okay, the UK hasn't had a chance to vote for Liz Truss, but I'm fairly confident in saying Scotland wouldn't vote for Liz Truss as Prime Minister. It didn't vote for Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. It didn't vote for Theresa May. It didn't vote for David Cameron. Scotland hasn't voted Tory in my lifetime, our lifetime. And yet we continually have governments that we don't vote for. And when we have brief respites of a Labour government, they often turn out to be pale imitations of the Tories rather than a genuine alternative. And fundamentally, it's not us who decide. We have to hope that England votes for the least bad option. Scotland should have the right to vote for the government and get the governments it chooses, not just in the Scottish Parliament, but on every issue, have every issue in the Scottish Parliament governed by those we choose.
Do you think Keir Starmer is a pale imitation of Liz Truss then? Will that be your message going into any general election?
If you're asking me, is Keir Starmer, is Liz Truss worse than Keir Starmer? That's not a difficult question. I'm the SNP leader who has offered to work with Labour in the last 3 general elections to lock the Tories out. It's Keir Starmer and Labour who turn their back on working with the SNP, not that way round. I want to see the Tories out, but you take Brexit, for example. The Tories imposed Brexit on Scotland against our will. Keir Starmer, to his credit, and I worked a bit with Keir over this very constructively, Keir Starmer was a passionate opponent of Brexit and made the case more powerfully than many others for why we should be in the European Union. And yet he's now saying he's given up on that. So Keir Starmer...
Isn't he respecting the result of the referendum?
But in Scotland, the result of the referendum was massively against Brexit. So, and opinion polls in the UK now say most of the UK are against Brexit, but that's a point. There's no point in replacing the Tories. We all want to see the Tories replaced, but surely you're going to do something different. And if he's not prepared to offer, because he's playing to voters in Middle England, so as far as Keir Starmer is concerned, Scotland just has to suck it up. He wants Scotland to vote for him, but he's not prepared to actually deliver on what the majority of people of Scotland want on that key issue. So in that sense, that's what I mean by pale imitation. You hear, I was appalled, like many people were, just the other day to hear Rachel Reeves say that the problem with the Tories on immigration was that they hadn't deported enough people. That's appalling. Labour should be standing up for free movement, for attracting people to come and work and live and contribute to this country, particularly given the labour shortages we have. So, we all want to see the back of the Tories, but I think most people want to see a genuine alternative to the Tories. And in Scotland, most people don't want to be in a position where we just cross our fingers and hope that England doesn't vote Tory, that we actually have some control over who our government is.
Now, you have suggested that the next general election could be a de facto referendum if the Supreme Court hearing, and I know you don't want to speculate, but if it doesn't go your way, but given that referendums are generally single issue and the terms are set by both sides and agreed to, I mean, a general election isn't like that. Even if you were to win a general election,
Gina, that's why it's not my plan A. So yes, that's why I want a referendum, and it's why I think the choice of the people of Scotland in electing the SNP on a manifesto commitment for a referendum should be respected. So I don't think if plan Bs were perfect, they'd be your plan As, and so I don't think that is the ideal, and it's certainly not my preference in terms of how to resolve this issue. But if, and we are getting into the realms of speculation, but if we end up in a scenario where the Supreme Court says the Scottish Parliament doesn't have competence to legislate and Westminster continues to refuse to reach an agreement, then what is the alternative to taking it to an election? Just saying, well, yes, Scotland, your votes, your voice, your democracy doesn't matter. I'm not prepared to do that. But the preferable and the right and proper and democratic way to proceed is through a referendum. Let people make their case. I'll make the case for independence. Liz Truss or whoever comes after her can make the case against independence. But the key thing is the Scottish people get to decide.
Now, Liz Truss has accused you of being part of an anti-growth coalition, or the SNP anyway. And the fact is that the Scottish economy has been kind of lagging behind the UK economy over the last few years, pandemic excluded perhaps. But what is your economic plan for Scotland? I mean, where is the growth going to come from? And of course, the North Sea is not going to be the place because you do not want more drilling.
Let me take those issues. Firstly, in terms of Liz Truss's nonsensical anti-growth coalition comments, which seemed more about showing Liz Truss up in front of a Tory audience than anything else. If she really wants to find people who are anti-growth, she should look closer to home. The people who've taken us out of the European Union, whose obsession with immigration is causing skills shortages in our economy. That's the anti-growth forces that are within her own party, actually. In terms of the performance of the Scottish economy, I'm not sure that is true to say that. You take many indicators. Inward investment, for example, for several years. The best performing part of the UK is Scotland, outside of London, on productivity. We've closed the gap with the rest of the UK in productivity. And growth in Scotland, as in the UK, and many economic decisions are actually reserved to UK governments, is not as we would want to see it. Our strategy is encapsulated in the strategy for economic transformation, which sets out our priorities. Domestically, the green jobs, the key sectors where we have a real advantage, from tech to life sciences, and of course renewable energy, focusing on continue to build our export performance, continuing to support inward investment.
But not tax cuts. Tax cuts don't come into your growth strategy.
Well, tax cuts, show me a kind of credible economist who say the way to growth is just through tax cuts. We've got to have a balanced, progressive tax system. Scotland, right now, most taxpayers pay less income tax than in the rest of the UK. We'll take decisions on tax going into our budget. We have a more progressive system than the rest of the UK. So these decisions have to be taken in the round. What is absolutely wrong-headed is to give massive tax cuts to wealthy people while our public services and the majority of the population are struggling. So tax cuts are part of a picture, but they're not the only. It's about what you invest in. It's about the entrepreneurial culture you support. It's about the business environment overall, and we've got to get that right as a package, not focus on tax cuts as the only lever.
Okay, last couple of questions. I realise we're short of time. There was a rally outside the Parliament yesterday. You've seen that tweet of J.K. Rowling wearing her T-shirt saying that you're a destroyer of women's rights. I mean, have you listened enough to women, on the women who don't agree with you on the reform of the gender recognition?
I've listened a lot, and people have a right to express their view, and they've a right to express that view in whatever way they see fit. I think we should all try to respect different views. I feel very strongly about these issues. I've thought deeply about them. I've listened to all different arguments, and my view is as sincerely held as the views of those on the other side. What the Gender Recognition Bill seeks to do is simplify an existing process to make it less degrading, less traumatic, less invasive for people who want to legally change their gender. And I don't think that is a bad thing to do for a group in society, very, very small group of people in society.
Should there be safeguards? That's what they worry about.
Let me come on to this. Yeah. A very, very small group in society who are already possibly the most stigmatised. So simplifying and making that process less inhumane is the right thing to do. In terms of safeguards, so the worry is that some men will choose to exploit that process to abuse women. Now, you know, I'm 52 years old. In my experience, most men who want to abuse women don't feel the need to change their gender to do it. And abusive men are what we should be focusing on. They are the risk to women, not trans women. If you, under the bill, if you seek to fraudulently try to change your gender, remember it's still going to be a statutory declaration, a legal process, having to declare legally that you want to live in your new gender for the rest of your life. If you do that fraudulently, it's a criminal offence that can send you to prison. So yes, there are safeguards there. The last point I'd make on this, and it's where I do feel really strongly, just as strongly as people who I respect take a different view. I am a lifelong feminist. I've spent much of my life, and I've spent a long time in public office doing things to improve the rights of women. There are big threats out there right now to women. Misogyny, violence, sexual violence, all the fault of abusive men, not trans women. There are lawmakers in countries across the world trying to take away our reproductive rights, restrict access to abortion. You've got women, you know, so bravely fighting for basic human freedoms in countries like Iran. These are the threats to women that we need to stand up against. And for as long as we focus on trans women being the threat to women, which they are not, we actually miss what the real threats to women are. And as a feminist, it's those real threats that I want to continue to play my part in taking on and defeating.
Okay, and lastly, Eurovision, Liverpool or Glasgow?
Well, I'm not sure that's the hardest question I've been asked all day. Glasgow, I don't know, I've no inside track, but Glasgow, such a great track record in hosting big events. You know, obviously we are, you know, hosting about 20% of all the displaced Ukrainians in the UK and Scotland, and we'd be hosting on behalf of Ukraine. I think that's important. But, you know, Eurovision is all about fun and big personalities, and there's possibly no city on the face of the planet that does fun and big personalities better than Glasgow. So I've got my fingers crossed for my home city.
Okay, First Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.